BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday, another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to the recent episode that I did on Zodiac Killer, the Linkletter Connection, talking about a lot of crimes that happened in California in the 1960s. But one of the most famous sets of murders is the Tate LaBianca murders that occurred in August of 1969, involving Charles Manson, as well as his followers, who are simply known as the family, sometimes called the Manson family, and sometimes even the Family Jams. Now, when I started this series 2 years ago, hard to believe, I was beginning with an icebreaker question for you guys. What is one thing that you are proud of that no one else would care about? And perhaps a better way of phrasing that is, what is something that has some meaning to you that maybe other people wouldn't appreciate? And when I began, I said that I have watched every episode of Crime After Crime, and I've also voted in all of their polls, as well as following all of their material on Twitter, YouTube, all of that. Crime After Crime is a monthly podcast that is available here on YouTube as well in video form, hosted by John Lorden and Danielle Hallen. And in the winter of 2020, Stephanie Harlowe appeared as a guest host on Crime After Crime, and she said that she had a 6-part series on her channel about Charles Manson, and I simply thought, oh, I can't resist that. So I did 4 episodes responding to the first 4 parts of her series, and I really meant to do parts 5 and 6, but got caught up with some other topics as well, and I just felt like it was a loose end, something that I wanted to tie up, something that I wanted to complete, if you will. So if you haven't heard the first 4 parts, I would invite you to listen to those, but on all my multi-part series on this channel, I always want them to be available to people who haven't heard the previous segments. So if you haven't heard those old-fashioned black box recordings with the snowflakes, hence the appearance here, I would invite you to listen in the future, but you can keep listening now. And by the way, I still have listened to every episode of Crime After Crime. It's a monthly podcast, so it's easy to keep up with, and it'll be 4 years since that show started soon. I mean, absolutely shocking. It's about 3.5 now. It'll be 4 years in the fall. But another example of that would be something that I am proud of that no one else would care about. I recently received 5 blankets from a family member. 5 different types of blankets, and I used them to decorate my living room. Thank you, thank you. You can hold your applause, absolutely. Say something that you care about but no one else would care about. What is yours? What is one accomplishment that you are proud of that no one else would care about? Please put your icebreaker response in the comments section down below. Now, Stephanie Harlowe's series, in Part 5, began with the murder of Stephen Parent, a short recap about him, but to provide a few more background details when talking about Charles Manson, I think it's important to give the condition that if I make any mistakes, or if I misstate anything, if I have any material that needs to be corrected, I'm always open to do that. Please put your ideas in the comment section down below. Please put your observations. If I make any mistakes, call me out and say, this is wrong. This is what the right answer is. I want to read them. But as I understand, Charles Manson has a following. He's staying at a place called the Spawn Ranch. He is someone who wants to have a record deal. He wants to be either a famous musician or just have his music connecting with the world, so to speak. But he's also heavily involved with some facets of crime. And I forget the first person who said this, but Charles Manson isn't even so much a cult leader as he is a gangster. He's like an organized criminal. And one aspect of crime is drug dealing. And there's some very complicated twists and turns and very fine details in this, so, as I said, always open to correction. But there's an individual named Gary Hinman, who was a music teacher in California, as well as a bunch of other things. I think he was a grad student as well. And he was supposed to procure some mescaline for the Manson family, which they were then going to sell to a biker gang called the Straight Satans. Now, I knew none of this stuff before I started reading up on Manson. I don't really do a lot of drugs or anything, or any drugs at all, actually, other than caffeine. But mescaline is the component from certain plants that gets you high, like peyote, or even the San Pedro cactus. But when you hear people do peyote, right? They talk about how they're getting high on peyote. It's the mescaline that is actually getting them high. And Gary Hinman was supposed to procure this batch of mescaline, but when it was given to the Straight Satans, they got sick, something was done improperly, and they wanted their money back. And one member of the Straight Satans took a Confederate sword and broke it and gave it to Charles Manson. And if you've ever seen some Civil War movies or reenactments, like what they would do for a disgraced officer, taking the sword, breaking it over one's knee, and what Charles Manson actually did was he had the Confederate sword filed down to a point, like so. It's not the full sword, but that broken half that had the hilt and such and the handle, that was filed down into a sharper point. And eventually they confronted Gary Hinman about this, and Charles Manson struck him in the side of the ear with the sword. And there's a famous story that Charles Manson cut off Gary Hinman's ear, but I don't really think that's true. I think that he just struck him in the side of the head with that fractured sword, which had been filed down into a sharp point. So some of the other Manson family members stay behind. Bruce Davis is present for a while at the murder of Gary Hinman, but he even leaves for a while. And then there's also a guy named Bobby Beausoleil who is there. And he's definitely present for the murder of Gary Hinman, and then he ends up taking Gary Hinman's car. Bobby Beausoleil gets busted very easily because he's driving the car of someone who was just murdered, and he goes to jail. Now, this is the part where the theories begin. Why did the Sharon Tate murders happen? The Tate LaBianca murders. Why did they happen? Some people think that it was simply to get Bobby Beausoleil out of jail because he was very loyal to Charles Manson. Other people thought that it was a drug deal gone wrong, which we'll talk about later. And then there's even the idea out there that this is just the conventional narrative, that there's no deeper meaning, that Charles Manson was very upset that he wasn't going to be a famous musician, and he thought people in the music industry had betrayed him, so he wanted revenge not only on the music industry, but also just on the elites of society for rejecting him. Lots of theories out there. But Bobby Beausoleil is in jail, and then people go to Sharon Tate's house, and that's really where Stephanie Harlowe's Part 5 begins. One guy is in the driveway named Stephen Parent, and he is shot with a .22 caliber gun, which, I think I even remember the guy's name. I think it was Mike Stratocaster who posted on on YouTube that it was probably a .22 caliber revolver, but I don't want to speculate too much. That was his observation. And Stephen Parent is shot. The conventional narrative is that he was there to sell a clock radio to somebody named William Garretson, but I mean, there could be numerous reasons. Stephanie Harlowe actually brought up a theory that she had found online. I mean, not her own observation, but a theory that she had found that Stephen Parent and William Garretson, who lived in the caretaker's house or the guest house, of so to speak, on the Cielo Drive property, may have been having a homosexual relationship. Those two may have been involved together because, of course, Stephen Parent had just been by there to see Garretson in the conventional storyline, but he denied knowing who Stephen Parent was later on, so some people speculate in that direction. But the members of the Manson family who are present are Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian. And they are there to do God knows what. The devil knows what. This is the famous line when Tex Watson's standing over someone and says, "I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's business." Now, what reason would he have to do this? Some of the alternative theorists out there believe that Tex Watson is the driving force of the Tate LaBianca murders, that he talks about how he was under Charlie's spell, and I mean, Stephanie Harlowe even brought up some of these points in her episode, that one reason why Tex Watson didn't completely run away from everything was he was so brainwashed by Charlie that he thought that he was going to enter some type of paradise kingdom. I'm paraphrasing, but that he would actually be with Charles Manson when the world was going to end because of the they were going to find the pit in the desert, the bottomless pit that would lead them to some type of magical city or something like that. I mean, is it possible that he actually believed that? Was he actually so far duped and brainwashed by Manson? I mean, I don't know. Other people think that Tex Watson got burned in a drug deal earlier that summer in 1969, and that he needed money because it was Tex and the girl that he was dating at the time purchased some drugs, but they bought them up front. Like, they gave the dealer the money and then they were going to get the drugs at a later time, and they were completely duped. They were completely bamboozled. Somebody offered them the deal of a lifetime, right? Except they had to give the money up front, and then they were completely cheated out of it. And they got deceived. So Tex wanted to get the money back that he had lost, and one way to do that would be to go to the house on Cielo Drive, because there were lots of people there, they had money, they might even have drugs that they could have used to sell for money. But the problem was, they were so high on speed, particularly Tex Watson himself and Susan Atkins, that it all just went to shit. They had just bungled the whole thing, and everything fell to pieces. Sharon Tate was murdered, and Wojtek Frykowski was absolutely eviscerated, and all the people in the house were murdered. And this brings up a very odd point about the Manson family. The only people who lived to tell the tale were the criminals. The only people who survived were the ones who committed the crimes, and we simply do not have a lot of testimony from other people, although Stephanie Harlowe did bring up one detail about how William Garretson, who's living in the caretaker's house or the guest house, whatever that is, he lived because Patricia Krenwinkel went down there to take a look, but she didn't actually see if anyone was around. She just kind of did a quick check, or maybe not even that much, and she just didn't really see what was going on or if anybody was there. But I believe Bill Nelson included some testimony from William Garretson in his book Manson, and Bill Nelson also talks a lot about the Zodiac-Manson connection, and that's even on the cover of his book, and Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's right-hand man, is a Zodiac killer suspect, and we'll talk about all that stuff later. But during the Sharon Tate murders, which is actually the murders of Sharon Tate, Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent, the motive doesn't seem to be completely clear. One could simply be that Charles Manson was just genuinely trying to get revenge on the media elites, and there were actually a lot more murders that were planned, and he didn't exactly say, go kill the people in that house. He just said, go to that house on Cielo Drive, take care of business. Or maybe the way that Charles Manson would phrase it, do whatever you think is right. Because when Charles Manson was being interviewed, he has said very clearly that he never lied to people. He has since passed away, but he would always say, I've never lied to you. I didn't tell people to do anything other than what they wanted to do. But in part 5 of this series, Stephanie Harlowe also pointed out that Tex Watson is a very sneaky character. He would run at any chance that he got. He would try to hide at any chance that he got. And did he have some type of ulterior motive that even Charles Manson didn't know about? I think that would be rather consistent with her assessment of it, that would be entirely possible. But no matter what happened, the Sharon Tate murders were just an absolute evisceration. The victims were ravaged, more or less, and Sharon Tate was stabbed 16 times, but Wojtek Frykowski was stabbed over 50 times, and not only that, he was shot and he was struck in the head with a gun, and I think most people believe that he was murdered that way because he was the biggest threat, and they were trying to neutralize him. But I do want to point out that there is a documentary that was put out called Jay Sebring Cutting to the Truth, and it was made by his nephew, and one of the reasons why he wanted to make that documentary was because he felt that the other victims in the Sharon Tate murders were simply not giving recognition, because a lot of the early news coverage simply referred to this crime as the murder of Sharon Tate and 4 others, and his uncle was Jay Sebring, who was actually the hairdresser to the stars. He just wanted all the victims to get their moment of recognition. So a big rest in peace to all of those people there: Sharon Tate, Wojtek Frykowski, Stephen Parent, Abigail Folger, and Jay Sebring. Now, the one point where I think Stephanie Harlowe said something that I wasn't completely sure how she was trying to interpret this, but that after the Manson family gets out of the house at Cielo Drive, they get into a car, Tex Watson starts driving, and she said something about how Patricia Krenwinkel was complaining about how her hands were hurting, and she thought that was kind of a weird thing to say. But I remember from watching the documentary Manson, which is available on the Popcorn Flicks channel here on YouTube, that Linda Kasabian provided a lot of the testimony, because even though some people are high on speed that night, I'm not sure if she was or not. Only she knows, to be honest, because not everyone tells the truth. But what she was talking about was that they were complaining that their hands were on fire because they had been stabbing the victims so many times, and the knives were hitting the bone, and their hands were just like, as Linda Kasabian said, on fire. If you ever do watch the documentary/movie Manson here on Popcorn Flicks, it is half documentary, half dramatization, and I really don't like it when they do that. I would rather they just do it one or the other, and they just either do a movie straight up, like a dramatic recreation, or just do it full-on documentary, and they really jump back and forth between the dramatizations, and then all of a sudden it's documentary narration. So that didn't sit too well with me, but I did like how they were sharing a lot of details from Linda Kasabian's perspective, and she is a character that is also very questionable, because some people think that she was simply a dupe, that she's just the lookout, while people like Susan Atkins and Patricia Krenwinkel are stabbing the victims, or at the very least bringing them to an area where they can be available to Tex Watson to stab them. She is just standing outside. But Stephanie Harlowe also did provide the detail that most likely she provided a knife to Sharon Tate, and her stories are also very inconsistent. The next night, though, there is the murder of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, another double homicide that is heavily committed by Tex Watson, but Charles Manson has a more personal role in this. While he did go to the house at Cielo Drive, he definitely came face to face with the living Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, and in a documentary, in an interview rather, which I saw in a documentary, but in an interview that Charles Manson did, he said that Leno and Rosemary LaBianca had to die because they had a black phone book that had all the names of people in the music industry, and I don't know if that's because of some shady dealings. I'm still not 100% sure about that. The motive for the LaBiancas also seems questionable. Again, people think that they simply wanted to rob them, or they wanted to obtain money from them, or that this was some type of way of covering up the crimes of Cielo Drive, that they wanted to make it look like it was a group of African Americans who were responsible for this. And that's one reason that after Leno and Rosemary LaBianca were murdered, that they left watermelon rinds in the sink because they wanted the police to think that African Americans had been responsible for this, particularly the Black Panthers. But in Stephanie Harlow's episode, she brought up a very interesting point, and that is that at the LaBianca murders, again, the murders of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, only 2 victims are present in this one as opposed to the 5 victims from the previous night. But Leslie Van Houten, a member of the Manson family, is there, and she wasn't at the Sharon Tate murders. Now, Leslie Van Houten's testimony was that she participated in the stabbing of Rosemary LaBianca, but she only stabbed her after she had already passed away. And the autopsy did confirm that Rosemary LaBianca did indeed have post-mortem stab wounds. She was stabbed alive and stabbed while she was dead. But the true analytical point from Stephanie Harlowe, and it's really good, is that, well, was Leslie Van Houten checking her vital signs? Was she a medical doctor? No. How on earth could she possibly have known that Rosemary LaBianca was dead or passed away? Maybe she meant that she was unconscious, but there's no real way that she could know that Rosemary LaBianca had been completely deceased. I think that that is something that is heavily neglected from a lot of the other Manson pieces of literature out there. But when I was listening to the Tate LaBianca radio program, which is hosted by Brian Davis and Tana Laufenberg, they found a section of the trial transcripts where Leslie Van Houten admitted that she stabbed Rosemary LaBianca while she was still alive, but then she quickly backtracked and then self-corrected and kind of like oh no, I didn't mean that. But, I mean, that is something that kind of can be piled on that, or just put it together, putting 2 and 2 together. There's no possible way that Leslie Van Houten could have truly said that Rosemary LaBianca was already dead based on what had actually happened to her. Maybe she actually did stab her while she was alive, but when you have trial transcripts like that, sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they say things that they didn't mean, or they got sidetracked, they spaced out for a second. Oh yeah, absolutely, I did that. Wait, what? No, I'm sorry, what was the question again? But I'm not exactly sure Stephanie Harlow's feeling on that exact subject, but I think that she had a line in there saying that Leslie Van Houten would not have known what happened to Rosemary LaBianca, and frankly, she didn't care. Paraphrasing again, but I think that maybe she is insinuating that Leslie Van Houten is somewhat more of a deceptive individual, or someone who is just a little bit sneaky in her own way, or not completely honest. How about just being deceptive? And very clearly, many people think that Leslie Van Houten may have been lying about stabbing Rosemary LaBianca only post-mortem because she didn't want to get charged with murder. That she wanted a lesser charge, or she wanted to get off more easily after the brainwashing wore off. But if you actually would like to see a dramatization of that, there's a movie called Charlie Says, which is all about the point of view of Leslie Van Houten, and I have a response to that here on Black Box All Night Radio, one of the old-fashioned Black Box recordings, much like this one, though, but traveling back in time. I simply think that we do not know because, as previously stated, the survivors are only the criminals. We cannot hear from the victims, and there are just a lot of people who are spreading theories about that online. So quite a lot of things happen in between the summer and fall of 1969, as well as the winter of 1969, but the Manson family ends up leaving the Spawn Ranch, and they go out to a place called the Barker Ranch in Death Valley, which seems like an almost inhospitable place, and even though I've read some other sources and watched some other documentaries, as I said, since I started part 4 of this, I really appreciated Stephanie Harlowe's retelling of the life in Death Valley and just how rough it was on the Manson family. She even said at one point that they were down to a bag of rice, they had a can of powdered milk, and some cinnamon, and that was all the food that they had. And then they would do things like go on food runs, and there was lots of auto theft. But auto theft will definitely come up a lot because there was a raid on the Barker Ranch on October 12th of 1969, and Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's alleged right-hand man, was arrested and taken into custody. Now, Bruce Davis is also a suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery. He is definitely discussed by Bill Nelson, a person who I previously mentioned, but also by Howard Davis. In fact, he's the subject of the Zodiac Manson connection. I've also interviewed Howard Davis on the Zodiac Killer channel's Interview with the Experts series, which I'm also the host of, and the final confirmed Zodiac crime occurred on October 11th of 1969, the murder of Paul Stein, the taxi driver, and Howard Davis's theory is that Bruce Davis, no relation, committed the Stein murder on October 11th at night, and sometime during the night or the day flew from San Francisco to Las Vegas, and then made his way to the Barker Ranch in Death Valley. Giving a shout out to YouTube user Jamie Hendrickson, who was asking about that, saying, did he fly to like LAX and then go to Death Valley? What Howard Davis told me in that interview was that he would have flown to Las Vegas. In Howard's theory, that is all alleged, but Bruce Davis is definitely arrested on the raid in the Barker Ranch, and the only way that he tries to string that theory together is by saying that it was during the evening after many hours had passed from the night of October 11th of 69 to the evening of October 12th of 1969. So, if you ask me personally, though, I don't believe Bruce Davis was the Zodiac Killer, and it's quite possible that he was at the Barker Ranch for a much longer time, but Bruce Davis simply does not want to talk about it. When he's confronted about it in prison, he simply says, I've not been charged with those crimes, so I have no comment, so to speak. But I had also read Tex Watson's book, Will You Die for Me, which is a memoir, more or less, or some type of autobiography, and he dictated it to someone. He shared the story with somebody named Chaplain Ray, and I've responded to that here on this channel. But Tex Watson also becomes Charles Manson's right-hand man for a while, and Stephanie Harlowe was the person that I learned a lot about this from. In the previous episodes, has stated that Tex Watson starts out as some guy who is rather level-headed. He's the all-American guy, so to speak, and he comes to California for a new beginning, but he trips very hard on a drug called belladonna, which heavily alters his mental faculties, and his brain has been fried, more or less, on drugs, and even one point when he was on all fours crawling through a crowd of kids and just saying beep beep, acting like he was a school bus. So a lot of things are going on with Tex Watson, but he ends up leaving California and goes back to Texas, hence the name Tex. And then one point that Stephanie Harlowe reminded me of that I had forgotten was that he goes across the border into Mexico, but then begins to think that he should go back and find Charles Manson again, because what if everything Charles Manson said was the truth? What if this organized criminal but actual cult leader is telling the truth about things? Because Charles Manson isn't somebody who is just saying, okay, you need to do whatever I tell you to do. He's saying that they're going to go out into the desert, they're going to find a bottomless pit, they're going to grow their numbers to 144,000, and they're going to find some enchanted city or something like that. So he thinks, I'll go after them, and I'll go back to the United States of America. And I've always been curious, like, what would happen if Tex just went on the run to Mexico and then just keep going all across Latin America or something? I mean, what really would have happened? Or how about somebody like Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's other right-hand man? Why wouldn't he, just like, stay on the run as well? Why did he turn himself in? And I believe that was, what was that, December 2nd of 1970 or something like that, when Bruce Davis turns himself in. But these people are following a lot of orders from Charles Manson. But I think that a point that most parties would be in agreement with is Charlie did not always tell the truth, or that he might have had some type of ulterior motive with the family. He says very clearly that he told the truth to reporters later on, but he seemed a little bit deceptive to the members of the family. And did he actually believe this whole thing about how they're going to grow their numbers to 144,000 and they're going to drive dune buggies out into the desert and find a bottomless pit and such, and there's going to be an upcoming race war? I don't think anyone would have believed that who's an actual cult leader, no. But the other point is, maybe Charles Manson wasn't as in control of everything as people thought. Like, they think that he's some type of brainwashing corruption agent, and Tom O'Neill even talked about this with Chaos and all the publicity that he did for that, in addition to his book Chaos. He, of course, appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast, did numerous public appearances, and saying that Manson may have been brainwashed by Project MK Ultra. Okay, that's not a fair way of putting it. That the thesis of Tom O'Neill's Chaos is perhaps that Charles Manson may have been a CIA informant, not an operative, but an informant, someone who is used to gather information, because you have the same psychiatrist that is working with the CIA in the free clinic in San Francisco, where they're doing experiments on people, that was working with MK Ultra, that was even working with Jack Ruby. His name is Dr. Jolly West, and it sounds like some wild, twisted conspiracy theory, but, I mean, you could just view it this way. And then Brian Davis responded to all this on the Tate LaBianca radio program. Okay, even if you have the same doctor in all these places, MK Ultra, Charles Manson, Jack Ruby, so what? How does that get from the clinic in San Francisco to the house at Cielo Drive? How does that actually mean that the Manson family were brainwashed by MK Ultra? I mean, what is the significance of Tom O'Neill's Chaos? And it's a very big question, because I certainly don't know the answer, and I definitely think it's some interesting food for thought, so to speak. But about some of the material discussed in Stephanie Harlowe's Part 5, the desert conditions become more and more inhospitable, inhabitable, maybe, are the right words, for the Manson family, and they just almost reach a breaking point. Two people run away, and they just wander the desert over and over again, and eventually, though, there's a lot of back and forth between Los Angeles and Death Valley, but there's a raid on the Barker Ranch, and Charles Manson is found hiding in a cabinet, more or less, and he gets arrested, and he's very polite and very formal, and he greets the officers with, "I'm Charles Manson," and he's taken into custody. But at this time, though, I would like to turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Charles Manson? Do you think that he was an actual cult leader? Or do you think that he was an organized criminal? Do you think that somebody like Tex Watson, who participated in all of the Tate LaBianca murders, he is perhaps the only person who can say that he participated in murdering every single person, which is horrible, mind you, absolutely horrible, but he is definitely present there. Do you think that he is more in control of things? Because what some people think is that Tex Watson was just so much more powerful than Charles Manson. I mean that physically. He could have easily overpowered Charlie. And did Charlie really have a stronghold on him? And as I said in his book, Will You Die For Me by Tex Watson, he talks about how there is a lot of disconnect. Like, he starts out just living in a tent on the edge of the Spawn Ranch, and he is not even incorporated into the group very easily, and it took a long time for him to even become, a recognized member of the Manson family. And you hear so many different things, but it is quite shocking that the Manson family have stayed in jail as long as they have. But on the other hand, these people were all given the death penalty, and then California took away the death penalty and then brought it back, but all the people who had been given the death penalty received commuted sentences of life in prison. And in many ways, though, I do not regret that, or I do not feel sorry for them because they committed crimes and they were participants in multiple homicides. But somebody like Patricia Krenwinkel did a couple videos where she was pleading her case why she should be given parole. And Patricia Krenwinkel was the only woman who participated in both nights of the Tate LaBianca murders. Susan Atkins wasn't present for the LaBianca murders, and Leslie Van Houten was not present for the Sharon Tate murders. But Patricia Krenwinkel is present for both. And somebody wrote into the comment section here on BBOR saying that, well, she only did that, or she says she only did that because she was under fear for her life that they were going to do something to her if she did. But, I mean, I do not believe that she is dangerous. And she's pleading for parole, saying, I've been rehabilitated, I was wrong, I fessed up to this, I've done more than 60 years in prison. Okay, not 60, she's done 50 years in prison. 50 years in prison. She should be released. But the strongest response to that came from Stephen K, nonetheless. Some people know him as Stephen K from his mother, as Charles Manson called him. He had the response to Patricia Krenwinkel by saying that the prison system is not primarily about rehabilitation, it's about punishment. And you have to be aware of that because, as I just said all this stuff about Tex Watson getting his brain fried on drugs, or Leslie Van Houten is talking about how she only stabbed Rosemary LaBianca post-mortem. I mean, as Stephanie Harlowe pointed out, she wouldn't have known that. They all have this go-to defense. They say, I was wrong. I take full accountability for my actions. Oh yeah, but it's all Charlie's fault. And then they say, oh yeah, but it was the drugs. Oh yeah, well, I was brainwashed. I wasn't thinking clearly, so okay, I'm not actually wrong. I know I said that a second ago, but yeah, blame somebody else. Almost always, you will hear that. You hear a lot of that from Tex Watson, and you absolutely hear that from Susan Atkins, who just said that she had been taking LSD so frequently that it took 5 years to undo the brainwashing or the effects from the drugs, and that is that stuff true, or are these people just making up stories because they wanted to get out of prison? And I definitely think that it's the latter, because you just even have to wonder what would drive someone to participate in murders like that. And, I mean, the Tate LaBianca radio program talks about this a lot, that Tex Watson eviscerated the bodies of these victims. He must not have been, well, firstly, not only mentally stable, but at some point, though, you just have to recognize that it's overkill or just out of control behavior, but he obviously was able to regain composure at certain points. He's the one who drove the car away from the Sharon Tate murders, so you definitely wouldn't be able to pull off any type of insanity defense, because that's what the lawyers always look for. Okay, this person says that they were psychotic, but they were able to plan their getaway. This happens all the time in the true crime world. That means that they have awareness of their mental faculties. And I will leave you with one final note that I heard in Stephanie Harlowe's Part 5 of the Tate LaBianca murder episode, or it's her series on cults and Charles Manson, I should say, Part 5, and that is that she's very critical of the LAPD, to the point where she says they make lots of mistakes all the time. And I think that that's a fair assessment. I think it's good to be critical of these agencies, because when I talk about the Zodiac case on Zodiac Mondays, absolutely you find all kinds of errors or mistakes or ways in which the crimes were committed, and the authorities did not preserve the evidence, or they make all kinds of unforced errors and sometimes forced errors. But I would like to go back to the concept of motive. I'll leave you with the two final questions. Then, of course, there's the icebreaker. But what do you think the motive for the Tate LaBianca murder was? And do you believe that Charles Manson was a cult leader or an organized criminal, or is he just something else altogether? You can put your responses in the comment section down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And as always, there are the pages for the Teespring page. You can get my book, Killer on a White Horse. As also, there is Raze Energy. Feel free to purchase anything from their website. Use the code NED075. You'll get discounts. It helps out the show. Like, subscribe, and visit Stephanie Harlowe's channel, as well as some of the other channels that I've been talking about, the Tate LaBianca radio program. And I should also point out that I've read Paul Watkins' book, My Life with Charles Manson, although I didn't discuss that one in this episode. And I've also watched some other films that I would recommend. But the one that's been nagging me the most is, there's one that's about the Manson connection to the Beach Boys, and I just simply couldn't remember the title of that one. However, I did think that that one was very good because Manson is heavily connected to the drummer for the Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson. I do have an episode on this channel about the death of Dennis Wilson, which, again, you can always check out any of the material here on Black Box Online Radio. And I will see you over on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88, for the bonus podcast. Until next time.